With the increase in AI, we have never, ever in the history of mankind been forced to have a conversation about what makes us human. And that conversation needs to be happening at like full volume right now, especially in our classrooms, because with this disconnect from ourselves that doesn't seem to be getting any better, we're losing who we are.
Hello, and welcome to the Politics Girl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Well, it's back to school, and today's guest reminds us that teacher burnout is often framed as an education issue when research shows us that the consequences of teacher burnout are actually a society issue. Studies show that stressed or burned out teachers contribute to poorer classroom climates, lower student engagement and achievement, and elevated stress levels in the students. The emotional well-being of our teachers may seem like some woke talking point, but it actually directly shapes the emotional and developmental well-being of our children during their formative years. We have to ask ourselves what happens to a society when the adults responsible for educating and emotionally regulating the next generation are operating in survival mode. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Dr. Jen Rafferty, PhD, the author of The Empowered Educator, which came out this summer, in which Jennifer argues that teacher wellness is actually foundational for healthy classrooms, healthy communities, and by extension, healthy societies. Her work focuses on practical, inside-out strategies that help educators regulate stress, rebuild resilience, and remain in the profession rather than leaving in droves. This ultimately benefits all of us. And I'm telling you, this is such a fascinating conversation, whether you are an educator or a parent or not. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, author, speaker, and the founder of The Empowered Educator, Dr. Jen Rafferty. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, thanks for coming. I think this is the perfect time to be talking about education as all of our kids head back to school.
Yes.
You have a PhD in educational psychology, degrees in music and education, certifications in emotional intelligence, neuroidentity, which you might need to explain to me, but you are also a TEDx speaker and you have your own podcast about unlocking teaching potential. And of course, you're the author of this new book, The Empowered Educator. The heart of your work tends to be around the well-being of a school being dependent on the well-being of its educators. So could you expand on that for us, please?
Sure. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit. Since COVID, I think there's been a big shift in conversation about well-being. We didn't even have language for this 6 years ago, but before COVID happened. And it kind of started back in, circa 2019 around character education, which was really important for kids. Character traits like honesty and positivity and empathy and this push for teaching kids language around these character traits that are important to have, which kind of gave a bigger picture to what education was meant to be, instead of just reading, writing, arithmetic, facts, those kinds of things, but also like, how do we be a good citizen? How do we engage in good human strategies just to be a successful person in this world?
No, that's really important. I remember my son's school did a whole, the whole child thing. And then they made the integrity steps, right? So it was like integrity, honesty, courage, like that kind of thing. I think that was a big push. I think you're right about that. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen that in their schools as well.
Absolutely. And that was really important. And I remember right before, I would probably say in like even 2019-ish, maybe the end of 2018 school year, I was in this meeting and it was, okay, we're having this new initiative now, guys, which I'm sure there was an acronym for that too. And it was, we're going to now assess students' social and emotional well-being. And we went through this new program where we would have to decide on a scale of how kids were doing, and teachers went bananas about this. How am I going to spend time doing this, assessing what does this mean? And I remember sitting there just kind of eating my popcorn, watching this whole thing play out and raising my hands at one point and say, hey, when are we going to be doing this for us as teachers? And it was met with laughter. And they thought I was joking. And I remember thinking to myself, how are you expecting us to deliver this type of information without paying attention to our well-being. Because going back to your initial question, any initiative, any policy, any program that we do is only as good and effective as the person delivering it. And if we're
Right.
missing the point of teacher wellness and well-being, we're not actually able to do the things that we say that we're going to do.
Right. So it's like if I put clean pure spring water in pipes that are all rusty, that I'm not getting my pure spring water, right? Like I'm getting a result of whatever the delivery system was to do that. And so you have to kind of start with the delivery system before you can actually affect who is getting it, which is really smart. I mean, you started a program based on this, right? For teachers before you even wrote this book. Tell me about the program.
So at the time in my own personal life during COVID, I had some special sauce happening at the Rafferty household because my husband and I decided we were going to get a divorce in December of 2019. And I ended up
Oh,
moving out of
what
my,
fun. What fun for
yes,
you. Good
yes, yes.
times, 2020.
It ended up being good for everybody, but it sucked at the time. And I moved out of my house with my two kids who were 5 and 7 at the time, the same weekend the world shut down in March of 2020. And everything I thought I was the day before, I felt like I wasn't anymore. I wasn't teaching the way I used to. I wasn't a wife. I was no longer living in my house. Singing itself, if you remember, in those early days of COVID was very scary. It was killing people. And so as a music teacher, I was just, everything was gone, it felt like. So I had this crossroads and this reckoning where I had to really decide who I was, just Jen, without all of these roles that I played, and who did I want to be and bridge the gap. So I continued down this path of studying cognitive neuroscience, which I always thought was so cool. I was a middle school teacher, and adolescent brains are wildly, I love learning about adolescent brains.
Adolescent brains, by the way, are much like when we are a baby. The amount of changes that happen, in such a short period of time where, babies are growing at a weird speed and they are learning so much so fast. The adolescent brain is many ways like that. It's a complete reconfiguring, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. It is often described like that. That comparison is completely accurate. It's just not as overt. We don't see it, as babies, we put little bumpers on all of the corners. We want them to hurt themselves. We make sure all their food is all mashed up. But as they're teenagers, we're like, you're fine. But there are all of these changes happening inside of them. And as a middle school teacher, I thought that was fascinating. So I really leaned into the research about adolescent brain development. And so it just kind of led me to this point where I was like, oh, right, I have a brain too. I wonder if I learned more about my brain, it could kind of help me go through this really difficult time. So I started my PhD in educational psychology during that time while I was homeschooling my kids, by the way. And then I leaned into getting my certification in neuroidentity evolution and emotional intelligence and realized teacher burnout wasn't anything new. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Nobody could. And remember that moment in time, it was like 5 minutes where everyone was like, we love you, teachers.
Yeah.
I don't know what
I mean,
happened to
listen,
that.
I'm going to tell you, Jen, honestly, I think a lot of us learned that we don't have what it takes to be teachers during the pandemic, right? When our children were supposed to be homeschooled or we were doing school online, and we realized how completely out of our depth we were to be educators, that how much we appreciated what teachers did. And like you said, unfortunately, it was a blip. We did the same thing with the medical community, and now we're tearing down science. Like we were like, we love you and we're going to bang pans. And now we're like, I don't know, you might be lying. I don't understand the scientific method, so I'm going to say it's
Right.
fake. Like,
Science.
it's ridiculous. No, educators are incredibly important. In the back of our heads, we understand that, but we often sort of ignore it when it comes back to it.
100%. And I'm still trying to figure that piece of the puzzle out, but I'm getting close, I think, to kind of understanding why that is. But in the meantime, I figured what a better way to help our world, our society, than going back to your metaphor, focusing on those rusty pipes. Right? How do we focus our attention on the inputs? If we want better outputs, we need to nourish inputs. And where's our linchpin? It is the people who are teaching our children. And
Yeah.
if they are completely burned out, worn out, frustrated, exhausted, overwhelmed, how are our students and our kids being affected by their experience in the classrooms? And how do we make that better? We stop leapfrogging over the adults and teaching character education and social emotional learning to the kids. We can still do that, but we need to actually focus on the adults in those spaces who are planting the seeds for this foundation.
That does seem to make a whole lot of sense. I mean, the goal when I'm looking at your research and when I'm looking at your work seems to be trying to find a way for teachers to enjoy teaching again and still have energy left at the end of the day for their own lives. And this seems important for people who lead schools as well, not only for staff retention, that their staff aren't completely burning out, but for those who want calmer, educational environments, better results from the students. I mean, I'm looking at people who have gone through your program that people can check out online. And it seems to have great statistical results. Like 73% of people who went through it, report fewer student behavior escalations after working with you. 79% felt more energized and engaged at the start of the workday. 87% saw positive changes in their classroom. Like, this is all really good stuff. I mean, the full title of the book that you've just written is The Empowered Educator: 10 Lessons to Prevent Burnout, Reclaim Your Joy, and Unlock Your Teaching Potential. Why did you feel you had to write this book? And now that it's sort of out and people are reading it, what are you seeing as a result or response to that?
I had to write this book because it was a calling. I started doing this work. The results that were coming through, I've had the opportunity now to see the longevity of this. I've had clients, school districts, programs now working with me since I started in 2021, which is amazing. So that retention allows me to see the ripple effect of change.
Right.
And I had to write this book to make sure that this information, this catalyst, was accessible to more people. It couldn't have just been held to me and my clients. This was a way for people to actually have it and hold it and action it. That's why I had to write this book, and it had to be now. And the results have been incredible. The feedback that I have gotten has actually been really consistent, which, as an author, to have someone reflect your work back to you and read between the lines of what you were really trying to do is the coolest thing. And I was just having a meeting yesterday with someone who was sharing with me that not only did they say that it took really difficult concepts like neuroscience and applied neuroscience and how that matter, like what does it matter even in your classroom, and make it really accessible to use, but it also felt like they were given back their agency in a world where education and people who work in education feel so much like everything is out of their control. We forget that as people, we have agency in every moment of how we get to show up. And once teachers, educators, school leaders, parents especially remember that agency, that's when things really start to change.
Yeah. And I can see how it's different to focus on the teachers themselves, because I know that when I was a young parent, I was reading every book on childhood, right? I was reading The Whole Brain Child. I was reading The Gift of Failure. I was reading everything to help him. But then I was sent him off to school for 8 hours a day, right? Like he went to school. And then how are the teachers doing there? I mean, clearly teachers right now in America are facing an unprecedented amount of pressure and exhaustion, not just with the cuts to the Department of Education, which does not help, but in all levels of education, right? My son just graduated from an excellent private school here in Los Angeles, right? So he's not dealing with the cuts to the public Department of Education, but I can't tell you how many of his teachers seem close to losing it, right? Who seem demoralized. They are overworked. They are underappreciated. I think the point is that our educators need to be doing more than just surviving, right? Because burnout is real. Like Lachlan had a teacher, my son Lachlan, he's 18, he's going off to college next week. He had a teacher that he absolutely loved, but she was clearly going through something. And by the end of the year, she was on her last nerve with every student. She could no longer connect with them at all. And it broke Locke's heart because he loved her, but he was like, she's angry all the time. I don't know. And I was like, she's going through a lot. I know she's got this, she's got that. But like, we don't think about the teachers. We just say, we expect you to be here, do this, also take on this sport, take on this thing. We need you here for the, thing after school. And I think these poor teachers, who are often parents themselves, are literally at a breaking point. And then how can they bring the best to our own kids?
They can't.
Right.
They absolutely absolutely can. And that's why this is not just a school issue. This is a societal issue.
Correct.
Think about too, you just said you had put your son in private school. This is not just a public school issue. This is in all school, charter schools, private schools, religious schools. I mean, everyone who is an educator in an educational system is dealing with this right now. And when we have our kids living in environments for 8 hours a day with people, and it's more than 8 hours because let's be real, our parents are, everyone is activated right now. Everyone's at like an 11. Everyone. And so if that's the normal, what's happening to them biologically, and this is where like that neuroidentity certification comes in. You were asking a little bit about
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah.
That's where it's affecting our kids at a biological level, where their nervous systems are getting information that like, okay, this level of activation, this level of stress is normal. They don't have a chance to then live a life that feels calm and regulated because their nervous system learned that that isn't normal. And so the work that has to happen then as they grow up, it's unnecessary. What if we just took the source and shifted the way that we were operating, and then our kids could understand what it's like to be around adults who know how to regulate their emotions, who know how to come into a conflict conversation feeling confident and calm, who know how to deal with emotions that are difficult for another person, but not take them on themselves. These are the types of skills that you can't teach by talking about it. You teach them by modeling it. Because, you have a son, my kids too. If they don't listen to me, they're watching me, right? they're
But I will
watching.
also say it's not just that, like, he's also watching other people. In many ways, I could say something and then somebody else that he respects could say it that's an adult, and he will hear it more from the person that isn't his mom because he's like, you're an idiot. Like, that's
Right.
part of what being an 18-year-old is supposed to. You're supposed to be
Absolutely.
like, you're the dumbest person alive, so I need to go away from you. That's part of like growing up. You must think your parents are morons for a couple of years, so you leave them and don't inbreed. That's basically how it was like set up. But when he hears from another adult that he respects, he can hear the same thing I said, but he hears it that time, which is why teachers are so important, right? I mean, I think about the importance of what draws teachers to teaching in the first place. I'm looking at what you're doing, which to me, your book goes way beyond a generic teaching manual, right? It's like this toolkit for teachers to help them build, as you're saying, resilience, like to be able to get in there and say like, okay, there's a crisis here. I don't need to be a part of the crisis, but I can help facilitate this crisis. They're living in these stressful environments. Doesn't matter what kind of school that they're teaching in. There's noise in their own heads based on the world that we live in. And then you need to find this way, which I think your book does as I was going through it, to kind of reconnect with what drew them to teaching in the first place so they know why they're there as opposed to just like surviving while they're, in the school day.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And unfortunately, what happens so often is, we love Simon Sinek and Remember Your Why. And it's been bastardized. This is why we can't have nice things, because what happens is, our administrators come in and they're like, well, just remember your why. And if you remember your why enough, then your burnout should go away. And it's so backwards, and it actually makes it worse and increases the feeling of resentment that people have, because you can't tell me to remember my why and have all of these challenges just disappear.
And if people don't know Simon Sinek or the Remember Your Why, it's the concept of like, why am I doing this? It's your intention. I started something with the intention to help children grow into this, or I wanted to inspire a love of learning, or I wanted to tell them about history because history is the coolest thing ever. You have a why of why you got in the first place. And if people say all the time, go back to your why, go back to your intention. And if you are a burned out person, you can't always do that. You can't always access that. So that it's not always accessible to people. So I think that's what Jen's talking about in case you aren't familiar with those people.
I love him and his work, and it is important. And what happens is the message gets twisted as it comes down to teachers. And unfortunately, that remember your why isn't helpful anymore. So something that I do in the book is break that down in a way to be like, I see you, I get it. And also there needs to be a connection for something that's bigger than you, not so you'll find this incredible inspiration back to what you were doing, but so you can set boundaries, right? I mean,
Right.
knowing what your intention is also allows you to remember what's important and what's not important. Because when we're talking about our proverbial plates, nobody's taking anything off your plate. They're probably just keep putting more things
Piling it
on it.
on.
But if we give 100% of our attention to everything on our plate, that's just bad math. So, how do we, right? Like, how do we go from here's everything? What do I really care about? And how does that inform how much of my time, energy, and attention goes into each thing? That's the value of not just remembering your why, but living it.
We do most of our shopping online these days. We shop for clothes, home goods, skincare. Why not blinds? Honestly, I have shopped for blinds in a store where you think it looks great and then you bring it home and it looks flippin' terrible and it's the wrong size or the wrong color. I mean, there's just a better way to buy blinds, shades, shutters, drapery, and it's called 3-Day Blinds. 3-Day Blinds are the leading manufacturer of high-quality custom window treatments in the United States. 3-Day Blinds has local, professionally trained design consultants who have an average of 10 plus years of experience who will come to your home and provide the guidance and right blinds for you. You just set up an appointment and you will get a free, no obligation quote the same day. And if you're not very handy, 3-Day Blinds will handle it all for you. The design, the measurements, the installation. That way you can just relax and leave it to the pros. Check out 3-Day Blinds on Instagram and see how many amazing options they have. I'm telling you, I'm looking at our living and dining room right now and thinking, maybe we need shutters or wooden Venetians. With 3-Day Blinds, you can choose from thousands of options that fit your budget or style, from light filtering to blackout blinds to motorization and smart blinds that work with your Alexa. 3-Day Blinds allow you to easily and affordably upgrade your home. And with 45 years in the business, you know this is a company you can trust. Right now, get quality window treatments to fit your budget with 3-Day Blinds. Head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl for their buy one, get one 50% off deal on custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery. For a free, no charge, no obligation consultation, just head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. One last time, that's buy one, get one 50% off when you head to the number 3, dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. A lot of skincare makes promises they can't deliver, but OneSkin is different, and it's why my family continues to use their products. OneSkin never set out to become a skincare company. They were founded by 4 PhD longevity scientists who were focusing on one thing: skin aging. They knew that quick fixes and marketing trends were not what they were chasing. They tested the best-selling anti-aging products on the market, and they found the same problem over and over. None of them were working on the actual cause of aging. They were simply working on the surface signs of aging, and some of them didn't even do that very well. So after years of research and testing over 900 novel peptides, they developed OS1, the proprietary peptide proven to address a leading driver of visible skin aging. It's the foundation of every product they make. So over time, you will actually see smoother skin, more even tone, radiance, and visibly fewer lines. It's about skin that both looks and acts younger. Like I said, I got my husband into skincare this year, and he's been using OS1 Eye and OS1 Face. I personally love OS1 Sunscreen, and I'm not the only one that loves it. OneSkin results are backed by 4 peer-reviewed clinical studies, over 10,000 5-star reviews, and they've been recognized by Bloomberg and Fast Company as a leader in skin longevity. Born from over 10 years of longevity research, OneSkin is helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. For a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using the code PoliticsGirl at oneskin.co/politicsgirl. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with the code PoliticsGirl. And after you purchase, if they ask where you heard about them, please support the show and tell them that we sent you.
That's the value of not just remembering your why, but living it.
Yeah, no, I would actually say even from I could not be an educator if my life depended on it, but I often go back to my intention with the work I do here. When I was building it out and I was trying to figure out, do I take this job? Do I work with these people? Do I do this? And I would go back and I would say, what was my intention of starting Politics Girl? And it was to educate, inspire, and inform, right? And so if the thing that was being offered to me was not part of that, I was like, oh no, I didn't get into this to make money. So I don't need to take that thing. Like, of course I'll need to make money at some point, but like, I don't need to sell out for that because that was never my intention. So I could return and I could say no to things that were not for me. My job was not to make sure everyone knew I was special. That was not what my job was not to be important. It was to educate, inspire, engage people. Like, and if it didn't fit into that, I could say no and happily say no because I knew what my intention was. And I think for teachers, that would actually be very helpful. Like, I don't need to say yes to everything that you are absolutely going to put on my plate. And I think the thing is that I think your book feels accessible because you're telling stories that include your own personal experiences, but you're also giving practical strategies, things that are easy for people to understand if you're an educator, that can shift both their work life and their internal life to make things better for both themselves and their students. So whether there's a teacher stepping into their first classroom or someone trying to deal with like the long standing demands of like a career that they've been in for 30 years, I feel like this book would work for either of those people because I think it's ultimately empowering people to have a life outside of school that then they can then feed into their school life. How is our society affected when teachers get burnt out?
I really think that teachers are the canary in the coal mine, the litmus test of our society.
Yeah.
And I think that when we talk about it like that and we see the people who are tasked with taking care of our next generation and it's not a secret. I mean, they are screaming for help and support, and we know that they need more raises and resources and respect. But at the end of the day, it seems as if, especially now, we're screaming into the void.
Yeah.
And activism in this regard is obviously extremely important. This strategy, this technique, the work that I'm doing is more of a going in through the back door. Whereas, organizations don't change until people change. And the only person that you have any agency in changing is yourself. And so while you can do the bang down the door activism, it is equally as important, and maybe even I would say more important, for you to do the inner work for how do you show up to the challenges that you're going to be facing. And the message that's there for society at large is just that. We're so distracted and we've forgotten this connection to ourselves, and we call it woo woo because we don't want to do that, because sitting with yourself is uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, and we've forgotten how to do it with the smartphones. I mean, I think that is a huge one. Like, you don't sit with your own feelings because you just pick up your phone. If you're waiting for someone, if you have like a second to yourself, you're like, I'll just scroll, and you don't sit with your feelings at all anymore. And I read a book for my son. I read a book called The Gift of Boredom. You know what I mean? Like, it is essential that we have those moments where we're introspective and we say like, ooh, what's really missing here? Like, why am I unhappy? Not just can I fill this unhappiness with stuff and information, but like, what's happening here? Like, where did I go off track?
Yeah, and those questions are uncomfortable, and your brain is inherently pain averse. So those questions are going to be challenging, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to get that hit of dopamine from your phone than actually sitting with yourself for 30 seconds to just even not even answer those questions, but just acknowledge that they're there. And so that's where this inner work comes in too, because when you start to develop a sense of metacognition for you to be able to think about thinking, that's what metacognition means, understanding, okay, this is a thought that's coming through. What do I want to do with that? The more you get really good at that, the more you can decide, well, is this thought actually serving me? Is this something that I want to hang on to? Or not. But we have to get quiet enough and be comfortable in the discomfort. And I'll tell you, especially now you brought up smartphones, but with the increase in AI, we have never, ever in the history of mankind been forced to have a conversation about what makes us human. And that conversation needs to be happening at like full volume right now, especially in our classrooms, because with this disconnect from ourselves that doesn't seem to be getting any better, we're losing who we are and the core of who we are. And this is, I'm going to bring it back to, especially for our babies, our kids. They need to know who they are, and we can't teach them by telling them. We have to do the work ourselves.
Yeah. And honestly, I've seen a couple schools and colleges too, but some high schools that are making kids write everything. They're not having any tech in the classrooms right now. They're doing experiments to see like how it works, because we are forgetting how to learn. We are forgetting how to think. And in many ways, I think that's what the tech bros want for us. They want us really stupid to be kind of mindless drones for whatever horrifying future they have in mind for us. But a lot of schools now are doing sort of a test with like, what if we have to write every test? What if you have to write the notes in this class? What if we're not using smartphones and smart pads and this kind of thing? And I think it's really interesting. I mean, going through the research, clearly burnout trickles down to the students. It feels like teacher burnout and teacher well-being might be one of the most overlooked things for us to consider to improve societal outcomes, right? Like we should have been talking about this way before, but I think almost forever, aside from, as you said, the pandemic where we all realized we were not teachers. We were stuck with our kids and we were like, oh my God, I'm terrible at this. We've overlooked teachers for so many years because we're like, oh, well, they're complaining about the union and they have this and they have that. They got the summers off. And it's not the reality for most of these people who are doing this incredibly important job. And I think we feel it, in bits and pieces when we're like, these guys are asking for supplies for their classrooms because they don't have enough money. And then they're told by the government they can only write off $250 where we can write off private jets if you're a super executive. You know what I mean? Like we have been treating teachers miserably for years. So it's not surprising that teachers are like, flatlining mentally.
It's true. And, what do we do about it? That's the thing. It's like, well, so
Right.
now what? And for
Now what?
me, this is a now what? This is okay. We can't make anybody do anything. We can't make these policies change overnight. We can't change the public opinion overnight. What can we do? We can remember our agency. And, I just kind of alluded to it briefly with this idea of metacognition. A lot of the stress and burnout that we feel, we're like actively fighting against our biology with this. And we're adding to the problem because the teachers who are experiencing this often ask, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I broken? And you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're human and your brain is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But no one has been taught or told the skills to navigate through that. And instead of fighting against your neurobiology, lean into it. Recognize, oh, wow, I'm feeling really burnt out. That's really interesting. I've been, eating Ben and Jerry's and hanging out on TikTok for 5 hours. Like, what's up here? This is so interesting. And just have a moment of little noticing and decide, what do I want to do about this? Instead we just kind of fall into this autopilot and stay in this rut and you don't have to. And I'll tell you, as somebody who practices everything she teaches, I was that burnt out teacher. And now here I am, just a small 6 years later, as you said, a TEDx speaker, featured in Forbes, and now having this big book with Penguin Random House. I did the work. I'm not the same person I was when I was burnt out and teaching, and nobody came to save me. I did this work myself. And that's what I want to make sure that everybody knows.
They have the capability of doing. You're just giving them a roadmap in which to do it. There's a quote at the beginning of your book from Henry Adams,
Yeah.
and he says, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell when his influence stops. And I think that everybody has a story of a teacher like that, someone who changed their life, someone who saw them when other people don't see them. I know that I was bullied relentlessly for years in elementary school. And then in third grade, after an incident where the same girls who had been after me for years, they came after me with a baseball bat. The baseball bat ended up breaking. I mean, this is the 80s, right? People are like, what? I'm like, yeah, this happened. And we all ended up, the four of us ended up in front of Mrs. Wilson. And Mrs. Wilson was our third grade teacher. And the girls told the story, and there were three of them against my story. And she saw right through them. And it was the first time a teacher saw right through them. She had their number. She had been paying attention to how the dynamics were in her classroom. She knew what was up. And the same girls had done this through me through second grade. And the second grade teacher thought those girls were just darling angels, and they were nightmares. They made my life hell. And I'll never forget Mrs. Wilson seeing the truth, seeing me, this adult in school who had my back. It meant the world to me, because teaching isn't just about education, right? It's about supporting children through everything they go through while in school. And that takes real work and it takes presence. And if you're just hanging on, you can't be a Mrs. Wilson. You're going to be my second grade teacher, Mrs. Felker, who missed it all.
It's a great example, and I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm so glad that you had that teacher in your life. I mean, right? I mean, this is we all have these horror stories of growing up, and oftentimes it is a teacher who, like you said, who saw you. But if that teacher is exhausted and completely fried and has now had to pay for her own pencils and folders and decorations and calculators and is so resentful of even being in this room, and now you have a student saying, hey, this happened to me, how could they possibly see past their nose?
Yeah.
And what a life-changing experience that was for you.
Yep.
And what are we missing for our kids? What are those potential life-changing moments that are never going to happen because our teachers can't show up the way that
Yeah.
Miss Wilson did?
So we are dropping our son off at college across the country this week, which means moving forward, Sean and I will only be making dinner for two. And since we aren't as concerned with making sure we have healthy, well-balanced meals the way we were when we were feeding and taking care of our child, I'm afraid we're going to just end up grazing or ordering in all the time. And that's why I am so glad we have a Cook Unity subscription. Cook Unity is the first chef-led meal delivery service that makes your meals in small batches inside local micro kitchens across the US, not factories, so every dish arrives at your home with the kind of freshness you would get at a restaurant. We're talking meals from Michelin star chefs, James Beard Award winners, and Food Network stars. The meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and can be refrigerated for up to 7 days. And the food tastes like someone just made it for you, because someone did, in a small batch, sometimes that morning. Cook Unity uses real culinary talent in real kitchens. This isn't chefs just slapping their name on a factory product. This is chefs actually doing the cooking. There are hundreds of dishes to choose from, and the menu is constantly updated. They have over 10 different dietary preferences, from low sodium and GLP-1 to gluten-free and pescatarian, and over 25 global cuisines, from Mediterranean and Korean to Mexican and Italian. You name it, they have it. The choices are split up by region, so you know you're getting fresh, local food from nearby kitchens. Right now, the West Coast has a harvest chicken breast with grape pine nut balsamic salsa that is delicious, and glass noodles with shrimp that I would literally never make for myself because I would blow it, and I'm really excited to eat both. So test what happens when real award-winning chefs make fresh, small batch meals just for you. Go to cookunity.com/politicsgirl or enter the code politicsgirl before checkout and get 50% off your first order. That's 50% off your first order using the code politicsgirl or going to cookunity.com/politicsgirl. So, as I said last week, our darling golden doodle Chips, our best friend and pod dog, died this summer at 12 years old from liver failure. We really did everything we could, but we couldn't save him. So we brought him home for 3 days so we could have his favorite things with his favorite people, and then we could say goodbye. I'm sure everyone feels this way about their dog, but Chips really was the best dog in the world, and we are really missing him so much. One of the things I talked about a whole lot while Chips was alive was what an incredibly picky eater he was. And if you have a picky eater dog, you know it can be surprisingly stressful at mealtime. You try different brands, you put toppings on top of it. Sean even used to sit next to him and try and hand feed him. And you tell yourself, look, they're going to eat when they're hungry. But I swear our dogs know. They know the difference between real food and whatever most dog foods are made of, which is why we fed Chips Sundays for Dogs. Sundays for Dogs starts with 80% all natural meats and finishes with superfoods like kale and ginger and blueberries. They gently air dry instead of using high heat. So Sundays doesn't smell like dog food because it has no chemicals, no nutritional blends. It's just simple, complete nutrition. Sundays was founded by Dr. Tori Waxman, a veterinarian and dog parent who wanted a quality food that didn't need to go in the fridge or freezer. It required no prep. It made no mess. You get the quality of a home-cooked meal with the serve and ease of kibble. It's what dog food should be. And with over 100,000 dogs eating Sundays, let the reviews speak for themselves, especially from owners of picky eaters who have never seen their dog be committed to a food. We actually donated all of our extra Sundays to the shelter near us after Chip passed away, and they were so excited to have it. So why not add Sundays to your routine or make the switch? Go to sundaysfordogs.com/politicsgirl50 and get 50% off your first order. Or you can use the code politicsgirl50 at checkout. That's 50% off your first order at sundaysfordogs.com/politicsgirl50. sundaysfordogs.com/politicsgirl50 or use the code politicsgirl50 at checkout. Well, it's back to school. And I don't care if you're not in school anymore, back to school comes with new clothes. But nowadays, we have to be really careful that we don't spend too much money on new clothes, which is why I love Quince, because Quince proves you can hit the reset without breaking the bank. Quince specializes in effortless, high-quality essentials, with the idea being that you don't need a crowded closet to look amazing. You need the right pieces with the right fabric built to last. I spent all summer in Quince's linen shirts, especially their blue oversized boyfriend shirt, their silk maxi skirt, and a brown leather belt that I rarely took off. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories to cut out the middleman so you pay for the quality and not the brand markup. And Quince doesn't just have apparel. They do everything from hotel quality bedding and bath to kitchen essentials and thoughtfully designed furniture. So upgrade your everyday by going to quince.com/politicsgirl for free shipping on your order and 365 days of returns. Now available in Canada and the UK too. That's QUINCE.com/politicsgirl for free shipping and 365 days of returns. Quince.com/politicsgirl.
What are those potential life-changing moments that are never going to happen because our teachers can't show up the way that Miss
Yeah.
Wilson did?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, there's no way that everyone listening to this right now isn't thinking about a teacher that saw them when no one else did. I think about even my own husband, right? When he was in school, my husband was born with a club foot, so he had to continue to have surgeries to correct it, right? So when he was 6, he was in a wheelchair for a couple of months because he had just had another surgery. And the school system tried to move him to a different school because they were like, we can't accommodate his wheelchair. He needs to go to this other school. And his mom was like, no, he's staying with his friends. He's staying in his class. He'll be out of the wheelchair in 3 months. We have to keep him here. And the school administrators were like, no, he's got to go. And the shop teacher and the gym teacher were like, no, we can make this work. The shop teacher built a desk that put 2 desks together. So my husband's wheelchair would fit underneath it. And then the gym teacher would carry him off the bus every day and then carry him back on the bus at the end of the day. And 3 months later, my husband could walk again and he was fine. Without those 2 teachers, he would have ended up in a different school with different friends. 3 months later, he was out of that wheelchair. He hadn't missed any time with his fellow students in class. It was those teachers, they went above and beyond to help a student's life. And ultimately, that changes the adult they become. To this day, my husband will help anybody because he remembers what it was like when adults looked at him and said, no, we can help you, kid. Like, don't worry. That's the power of teachers. And we need to make sure we are cultivating them so they can do that for our students. That's just 2 people in my own house, right? That have stories where teachers changed their life.
Yes, that.
Yeah.
That is the reason why this is an emergency. That is the
Yeah.
reason why people need these tools. It is life-changing, and the experiences that our kids have in the classroom change the trajectory of their life.
Correct.
Who they become is dependent on their experiences most of the time at school. That's where they spend most of their time. So how do we make this a healthier environment? We can't keep putting social emotional learning initiatives for these teachers to say, hey, we're going to now teach this lesson on empathy this week. This is when you get the grumpy math teacher teaching a lesson on empathy. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
Your book itself, The Empowered Educator, has 10 lessons, right? And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind speaking a bit more in a couple of them, because I went through all of the lessons, but you have a section on rewiring your brain. What are you talking about when you say that?
So that's what I'm talking about. The whole chapter is about metacognition, about understanding.
Clearly, I like all this brain stuff. I'm like, tell me more.
Well, and actually to that point, what I think a lot of places miss the mark is we go directly to feelings, and like people don't want to talk about their feelings, right? But everyone's really interested in their brain. And so when we talk about the brain first, it's kind of a really nice runway to talking about some other things. So when I talk about metacognition or rewiring your brain, your brain develops its wiring for the most part from the 3rd trimester in utero until you're about 7 years old. And you're making meaning of the world when you have no context of the world. That's just how our brain works. And so I'll give you an example. Imagine you're a kid in your house, and in the next room, your parents are arguing about money, let's just say. And in your 5-year-old mind, you're like, oh, not really paying attention to what they hear, but you know that they're arguing and you know it's about money, but you have no idea what it is. Anyway, your 5-year-old brain now makes a connection that money makes people argue. And then you grow up And that becomes part of your wiring. And then you're wondering why you can never have enough money in your bank account, because somewhere deep down in your wiring, you've made this connection that money makes people argue and fight. And so that, knowing that our foundation of our brain is set by the time we're 7 years old is really important, because when we get older, we now have this ability to change our wiring, but you can't change something you don't notice. So just like how your heart beats, your eyes blink, your brain thinks thoughts. That is its job. And we think tens of thousands of thoughts every single day, but they're not facts. They're options. And people don't realize that I get to choose my thoughts. I don't need to attach to this thought that's causing me to feel something. So if that thought doesn't align with who I want to be, what my why is, how I want to feel, I can say, no, no, thank you, and choose a different thought that does align. And of course, it's not as easy as saying, no, thank you. Although sometimes it is if you practice enough.
If you practice enough, yeah, we've been doing this with my son for years. We're like, all those thoughts that are in your head, like you can choose to leave them in your head. They don't need to even become words, and they certainly don't need to become actions. You can choose. It is a concentrated effort, especially for people who overthink, but it's actually a real thing.
It is a real thing, and probably the most important thing that you can do. And so one of the ways to access it, because everyone's like, well, that sounds cool, but like, what does that mean for me? One of the important things that you can do to access this is slow down. We are on just hyper speed all of the time, and wear busyness as this badge of honor. That for me, one of the most life changing things that happened at the beginning of my journey was giving myself permission to just slow down 10%, like walking 10% slower, talking 10% slower, responding to that text message or email 10% slower. And that allows space for you to even catch or notice what's happening, because you can't change something you don't notice. So that's a lot of what that chapter is about. Once we understand that, that unlocks the door to a lot of other things.
And those kind of understandings can change your life. I remember somebody saying once, if you're in a rush, if you're late, slow down, because you often make more mistakes when you're panicking and you're trying to be, like even getting dressed, like you go to put your head through, it's on backwards. You go to put your arm in, you get stuck. You're like, what the hell? Like I'm already late. And it's because you're going too fast, and you actually have to actively slow yourself down to do something. People often say, like, I go on vacation and all of a sudden I feel like myself again. And you're like, yeah, because you're not at work, you're not rushing, you're in a different place, and you have actively slowed yourself down. I remember my son saying to me once, we went away for 2 days to Palm Springs for a spring break little getaway, the two of us. My husband couldn't come. He was doing something. And he's like, why are you like this? And I said, like what? And he was like, I don't know, you're like all calm and kind of like, this is awesome. And I was like, this is the real me. It's like vacation me is actually the real me. She just doesn't get to exist most of the time because I'm too busy trying to get it all accomplished. But like, we're away for 2 days. No one's expecting anything from me. And like, this is who I really am. And I remember thinking like, oh God, my child's looking at me like, who are you? This person is awesome. And I was like, oh, but I think that happens to a lot of us.
It sure does. And what if you could be that person all of the time? That's really what this is, because she exists clearly. And how do we cultivate that in times that feel high stakes? Because look, at the end of the day, no one gets out of here alive. I mean, this is just how this is. And so how are we being? We're not human doings. We're human beings. And we are focused so much on the doing that we just forget who we are. We forget who we're being. And that's the piece of humanity. During my dissertation work, Lee, I heard so often in the data as I was doing interviews that I just want to feel human. I just want a piece of that humanity to be part of what I do every day. And to hear that coming from educators was profoundly heartbreaking, because if we have lost perceivably all of our humanity from the people who I was interviewing in these places where we're developing little humans, something is very wrong. And that connection back to self has to start with everyone individually. It just does.
There's another chapter in your book that talks about designing the life you've always wanted, experiencing wellness that lasts. I mean, obviously the book goes well beyond teaching. And I think that that's important because we have, like you're saying, we have to start with the humanity in it, the being person who can then bring things to other people.
Another piece of this too is who you are is not what you do. So often I hear, and I did the same thing, and I'm sure you experienced this in your work, and perhaps this is part of your story too. But who I was as a teacher became who I was as a person. When someone said, introduce yourself, I often started with, oh, well, I'm a teacher. That was an identity that I held very close to my heart. But what happens is when things go wrong in that arena, it becomes personal. And that is not necessarily how it needs to be at all.
Yeah.
I was given a gift of that time during COVID to discover, who was I? I alluded to it before. When I was just Jen, when I wasn't a teacher, when I wasn't a researcher, when I wasn't a wife, when my kids were then at their dad's for half the time. I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And understanding that a lot of these roles that you have are just that. They're roles that we play, and we can live in them for a number of years, but that's not who we are. When we embrace that impermanence, know that everything is temporary, know that who we are underneath is really who we are, that allows us so much more freedom to be, like you said, calm, cool, Lee at the beach all of the time, because you're wearing your roles kind of as like clothes, right? You put on your blazer in the morning, and I'm the podcast host today, and I'm putting on a hat, and now I get to be mom. But once all of that's off, that you're still you underneath. And as teachers especially, we become so connected to what we do that we forget who we are. So to your point, like you said, this goes well beyond teaching, because this isn't about teaching. This is about the people who happen to teach. And that's a different paradigm.
America itself, I think, causes us problems because we're a capitalistic society. We are based around money. So often you go to any party, I'm sure everybody knows the first thing anyone ever asks you is, what do you do? And I
Mhm.
remember being in a period of time where I was a stay-at-home mom. I had stopped working. I was with my child, and I would go places with my husband. And I was like, I hate going. Because when people are like, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know, nothing. It made me feel like I was useless. Like I had no purpose. If I couldn't answer what my job was, I didn't exist in American society. And you could see people's eyes glaze over. And my husband and I talked about that for years. He was like, I don't even like to ask people what they do. I like to be like, what are you into? Like, because then you're talking about who they are, not what they do, like you're saying, which is an outfit you put on, but it's not at all who you are. And it's exhausting to constantly be like, and if you're a writer, if you're an actor, you're like, well, I'm working right now. And you're trying to justify yourself to people. And we want us to have a chance where we be. And I just really appreciate that you've taken the time to kind of figure this out. I could have you here talking forever about like, what's going on with the teaching classrooms? What's going on with the cuts to Department of Education? What are we going to do about, cutting people off at the knees about who they really are when they're LGBTQ in these public school classrooms, and they're like, don't talk about who you are. Don't show a picture of your family. I mean, there's so much that we could discuss. But I think the overall idea is that you are not what you do. If you are connected to who you are, you're going to be a far better whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that what you're doing now, especially for teachers who we know are the soil that our children are going to grow in, we want to make sure that they're doing the best they can. So before you go, what would you like to leave people with as they go into this school year and they're dealing with their children's teachers, or they might be teachers themselves? What would you like people to know?
The most generous thing you can do for the people in your life, and if you're a teacher, for your students, for your parent, for your kids, the most generous thing you can do is take care of yourself. And that feels so radical. And for me, having experience with now thousands of teachers, when I say that, it often, there's so much resistance to that. But truly, when you're better, everyone's better. The well-being of your classroom, the well-being of your household, the well-being of your relationships are dependent on your well-being. And it doesn't come from buying a new product or getting your hair done, don't get me wrong, like I love new things. I love getting my hair done. And
Yeah. I got to stay
um,
blonde. She's old now. This is important stuff.
all of that's great. And that's not going to support you in the way that you want to be in this world. who you are matters more than anything else. And as you're going back and making this transition back to the school year, your priority gets to be you. And if that feels uncomfortable, it's a moment of saying, isn't that interesting? And having some slow down time to explore that. That's what's going to make all of the difference.
Yeah, if you're settled, then you bring that to other people. You can be teaching from the same perspective I was on Palm Springs vacation, from
Yeah.
yourself first, when everyone's like, you're great. You're like, I know.
Yeah.
Look at
It's like
me.
when Maureen would say, I'll have what she's having. Yes, please. I want everyone to
Yes.
have what she's having. Yes.
Yes, please. Okay, so please tell people how they can follow your work, sign up for your programs, or buy your book.
Sure. So empowerededucator.com is the best place to go for all of those things, program, book, and I am most active on Instagram at @JenRafferty_.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jen, and thank you for doing this work to help till the soil that we all put our little people into.
It's the most important. So I appreciate you taking the time and being here. This was a great conversation.
So that was Dr. Jen Rafferty reminding us to slow down, that we aren't what we do, and we need to reconnect to who we are. That teachers are the soil in which we plant our children for 8 hours a day. So let's make sure they're the best that they can be. Yes, they need raises and resources, but they also need respect. And we need to respect ourselves above all. As Dr. Rafferty says, the most generous thing you can do for the people in your life is to take care of yourself. Because when you're better, everyone is better. I want to thank Jen for joining us today, and you for caring enough about the good of our society to be here. Until next week, PG out. Before I go, I just wanted to tell people that Politics Girl will be relaunching our new Substack in the first week of September with a weekly newsletter with top stories of the week so you can go into your weekend informed, a bi-monthly private kitchen conversation for our members, and a final Friday of the month Q&A with other perks. We will continue to have the Politics Girl Premium until the top of next year, but the plan is to transition people over and give them more bang for their buck. So keep an eye out for the new Politics Girl Substack. We're really proud of what we're building here. Thank you for waiting so long for me to finally get it right. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.